First heading, in no particular order, but first heading would be medical, which basically means science. If you think about the achievements of the West in terms of antibiotics, antiseptics, disinfectants, and all the other things that go with modern Western medicine, which have eliminated so many endemic diseases, which have eliminated perinatal mortality to almost completely. So many areas where people are able to live longer and healthier lives as a result of Western science and then the medicine that derives from it. I would say that was the first one. Second would be under the general heading of political. And I think this is an area where, again, the West has achievements that are not duplicated in other civilizations, although each of them have their own medical achievements. The amount that we've moved forward from Western medicine is probably greater than in any other case. And in politics, I suppose the core of the achievement of Western civilization has to do with democracy and freedom. Freedoms of speech, freedoms of thought, of assembly, of religion. In other words, the capacity to tolerate a wide range of points of view and behaviours while remaining a cohesive society. And another important part of that would be that what binds the society together is the rule of law and the fact that everybody is equal before the law, at least in principle, at least most of the time. We all know there are exceptions, but the rule of law and equality before the law, still part of the political achievement. And then I would say the other dimension of that has to do with democracy understood as our ability to get rid of leaders or governments if we don't like them, which is something that in an autocracy or other forms of government you do not have. So in other words, government is genuinely not just of the people, but it's permitted by the people and you can get rid of it. So that is a very important plank of democracy. And the other thing that's gone with those different aspects is, I said equality before the law. There's a level of equality, for example, between the sexes, between male and female in Western civilization, Western societies, that has not existed in other forms of government, other civilizations over the ages. That's one sort of spin-off effect of the political structures that I'm talking about. So I've said medical, scientific, I've said political. The third one I'd mention would be economic. And this has to do, I suppose, at the simplest level with two or possibly three, or certainly two industrial revolutions. The major one of the 17th, 18th century, and then you might say there have been at least two more, the electronic revolution and maybe also the digital revolution now. Those between them have enabled a level of convenience and prosperity that all the previous eras of the world could only dream of. It would seem like an impossibility if you said to somebody from a different civilization, even 100 years ago, let alone 500, we would be able to fly through the air. We would be able to communicate instantaneously from one side of the world to the other, seeing the person's actual face, and so on and so on. That level of industrial scientific revolution. But I mentioned it as economic because I think that's generated wealth. And while it is true that there are many criticisms of wealthy capitalists as a kind of key symbol of Western civilization, the fact is that it's the dissemination of wealth across the whole society that's characterized this civilization more than the existence of a relatively small number of very, very wealthy people who in any case tend to generate wealth for others as well. So the dissemination of wealth through an equality of political system in a world where science and medicine have been able to do great things for our longevity, our prosperity, our health, and so on and so forth. So that's three. And the last answer to the question, what are the achievements of Western civilization, I suppose would have to do with its art and thought and philosophy and architecture and music, all of those achievements. And it would take a very long time to list all of those, and maybe we can come back to it a little bit later. But these things are not just an adornment, they're not just kind of pleasant entertainment, but they're essential ways of thinking about being human, which of course are distinctive in all civilizations. So Chinese art is a wonderful adornment and enriching of Chinese civilization, but so is ours of ours, and ours is distinctively different from, you know, Aztec or Inca or Indian or, you know, or Chinese civilization. So Western art and thought, philosophy, buildings, architecture, music, and so on. So those would be my 4 key areas. We're hoping we'll make many, but the one that we focus on above all, I think, is giving young people at universities doing our degrees a chance to learn what the major achievements of Western civilization are in medicine and science, in politics, in art, architecture, literature and thought, and in economics. So we'd be looking at, in other words, giving young people a chance to get a sense of the sheer richness and thick diversity of Western civilization over 3,000 years, and understand that it's out of all of that complex diversity of contributions and achievements, not whitewashing the bad things, that we have grown and that our institutions are kind of founded on. The kinds of texts that we hope will form the nucleus of this proposed degree in Western civilization are, broadly speaking, great books in the sense of texts in philosophy, history and literature, starting with the Greeks, with the Iliad and the Odyssey and Antigone and Medea and great Greek drama and tragedy, great Greek philosophy, proceeding onwards through the Roman era, the medieval era, the Renaissance, and then on into the 19th century and the modern age. So you might call those books. And then secondly, we'll have courses on the history of Western art and architecture, which is a different kind of text, where you might look at the Parthenon, or you might look at Chartres, or you might look at modern buildings as well, modernism, everything in between. Renaissance rediscoveries of classical buildings, the history of art and architecture, Raphael, Michelangelo, Picasso, Monet, and so on. And then a course on the history of Western music, starting with Gregorian chant and early music and coming through to the 20th century. So music, art and architecture, literature, philosophy and history, the great books, in a sense, of Western civilization, and the kind of the radical, the revolutionary thing about what we're doing here is that this great books course, liberal arts course, is inserted into the standard Australian degree structure. Australia hasn't traditionally used liberal arts courses. It tends to be an American idea rather than a British one or an Australian one. So we're actually trying to do something quite unusual in putting this into an Australian degree without actually changing the rules of the degree. We're making this available to students when it hasn't been before, that kind of great booksy course.